Hey everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's episode, we have a story about a player that gets caught cheating dice rolls, a story about an old school Dungeons & Dragons player with murder hobo tendencies, and more. But before we get into that, here's Nipsey being sleepy to get our wholesome levels up before we dive right into the cringe. He always has to lick everyone. Anyway, now I think we are ready to dive right into these stories. Dude, just roll the dice. By Reddit user, Raga Delical. My friend had me sit in on their homebrew game a couple of days ago, wanting my advice as a forever DM after watching their regular session. It was a cool plot, with a fun party of characters. But I had some meh vibes from a guy that we'll call Josh, because that was his name. Josh was the only person to ask about why I was sitting in, and then kept going, alright, like I was there for any reason besides watching the game. One of the other players read it differently. I assumed he was implying that me and my friend were a thing, despite them having a girlfriend, so he backpedaled hard and shut up for a while. The issue I had was that he seemed to roll weird. He wasn't hiding the rolls exactly, but it seemed like his rolls only ever happened while something else was going on. And in a combat-heavy session, I was noticing weirdly high and consistent damage out of a barbarian who wasn't even at 16 strength. But as all things do, it was 3 hours in, and at the third to last combat, people are content to sit quietly and wait for things to play out. But this guy needs to roll to hit, and keeps trying to strike up a conversation about either the food to get after, or bringing up a joke that we beat the horse with an hour ago. Finally, everyone is just like, dude, just roll already. But like, jokingly, albeit tired as hell. So imagine the dead silence when he finally rolls the dice in his little dice tray, and they stick in place where they land, not moving once they hit the felt material. So me, being a bit tired and kind of miffed from earlier, swipe up his dice and toss them into the tray, expecting a normal roll. But they land and stick in place again. This absolute loser brought a magnet-bottomed tray to what's essentially my friend's first campaign and her big moment to tell a story with this new group of people, as she mainly pulled from the game store that they went to. After a lot of accusations and talk about what a dick move this was, Josh left, and apparently also left the store Discord. I stayed out of it. It's not my game, not my group. But seriously, what sort of lame MFer has to ruin a homebrew game this way, with someone they just met? And I'm more confused about how much money or time goes into getting a cheating tray when you can only use it for D&D games. I feel like the cost didn't equal the reward here. I can never understand why people cheat in tabletop RPGs. It kinda takes the fun out of the game when you have no risk of failure. And with OP's friend being brought in to watch the game to give the DM some advice, he ended up exposing a cheater. Though I have to say, the fact that this player had a magnetic dice tray at least shows some ingenuity, I guess. But it's no wonder that this player ended up leaving the game in embarrassment. Let's move on. Sorry, you're not autistic. You can't play with us. By Reddit user, Bitch Pills. This story requires some background. I GM an online game for my group of friends. Somewhat recently, we've had a new player join our group who wanted to bring her husband along. For context, he is autistic and I am not. A couple other players in our group are autistic as well, so it's nothing new, and the rest of us are all mature and understanding people to boot. It became clear that the husband of the new player was not a fan of how I run games. He didn't like my homebrew setting, he didn't like my hard adherence to the system's rules, and clearly my games just weren't for him. No issue, it happens. But I'm not about to change the way I run my games for someone new, especially when myself and all of my other players enjoy the way I run things. I tell him this in a much nicer and softer tone when he messages me about his frustrations, after he'd already made up his mind about wanting to drop out. The first red flag was that despite his wife having plenty of fun and complimenting the game and setting thoroughly, she dropped out along with him. She even told me that she wished she could stay, but felt guilty about doing so. Despite game drama, this couple is still in our friend group, and we hang out with them still doing other things. This is where the horror story starts. The husband expresses that he wants to start another game for the autistic people in the group. The only problem is, there's only 3 people total who fit that bill, including him. Hardly enough for a game, so he starts stealthily inviting people through Discord DMs, eventually inviting the whole group except for me. He tells them that they're allowed in because they're quote-unquote allies. Well, lo and behold, they all start to wonder where I am, so a few of them ask, and he makes up the excuse that I declined joining because the game wasn't my style. Only, he's not quick enough, and people have already begun asking me why I'm not in the new game. And when I ask them, what new game, they realize that something's up. He gets called out for lying, and it comes to light for everyone that not only was I not invited in the first place, but he did this to purposefully exclude me from the rest of the group. Now knowing the full story, everyone else is taking my side and telling him that he's in the wrong. He tries to make excuses, calling me an ableist and trying to convince everyone that I'm a bad GM because I don't, quote, yes and any character idea that gets floated my way. Unsurprisingly, this doesn't gain any traction, and he has resolved himself to not speaking to me. TLDR. A new player tries to steal my group of friends away from under me under the guise that I'm an ableist and a bad GM. It doesn't work very well, and blows up in his face. Well, that is pretty messed up. At first, it sounded like that player did the right thing. OP's style of game wasn't for him, so he decided to drop out. But then to do what he did and try to pull all of OP's players away from him, and lying about OP declining the invite is really scummy. And then to lie and say that he didn't under the guise of OP being some sort of ableist doesn't really hold much water, as by the sounds of it, OP already had a few autistic players to begin with that had no problem with him. Thankfully, it sounds like no one in the group fell for this ruse. Let's move on. Dungeons & Dragons player doesn't understand the concept of roleplay. By Reddit user PMP Cycles. About 3 to 4 months ago, I started playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition with a group of friends as I was graduating high school. There's me, playing a rogue, my 2 good friends, one of which plays a bard, he graduated with me, and the other one playing a warlock, he's a junior in college. Then we have 2 other players connected to the warlock, cleric, his girlfriend, and wizard, warlock's middle-aged neighbor. Then there is the DM, who is another friend of warlock, who goes to his school. Right off the bat, I'm gonna let you know that wizard was the problem player. He is a major old-school D&D fanatic, like 1st edition old, and does not seem to understand 5e, nor does he have any intention of learning. He was, however, itching to play because he hadn't played in years, and Warlock saw no reason not to let him. So we all ended up meeting at Warlock's house to play. Our campaign is very heavily focused on the Shadowfell plane. We initially meet in an inn, but are ambushed by some demons from the Shadowfell as we sleep, only to be rescued by a ranger DMPC. Yeah, the DM is a huge Lord of the Rings fan. We are able to flee without trouble as the ranger leads us to a mysterious city that has been recently terrorized by various entities from the Shadowfell. Over the next few sessions, the party by and large decides to explore this city for clues about the Shadowfell and why they are attacking the real world. We end up finding a cult that explains to us how to enter the Shadowfell and tells us about a magical song that can open up a portal for us mortals to cross into. At this point, we have had some but little combat, which seemed to annoy Wizard. He, in character, says, "Oh great,
More dialogue? When am I gonna get a chance to kill something? Maybe I should start with you people," referring to the cult.
Mind you, he is supposed to be lawful good. We move on and head off to the sacred abandoned temple to learn this song, and Wizard seemingly gets his wish. On the road to this temple, we are attacked by all manner of entities from the Shadowfell, from demons to devils, to Displacer Beasts to Beholders, to these effing Shadar Kai assassins that we just can't seem to shake. We enjoyed it though, and Wizard got his wish, which was more combat. But then, we make it to the city where the temple is located. We are greeted by the city guards who lead us to a priest, who explains to us that we will need to meet with the high priest of the city for a specific key that hasn't been used in a millennia, in order to go into the temple catacombs and learn the song. When we get to the high priest, Wizard has pretty much tuned out, as Warlock, Cleric, and me do most of the talking to convince the high priest to help us. We are at his keep, attempting to convince him to let us have this key. It's in his keep shrine. He is on the fence, but decides to pray on it. Once he gets on his knees to pray, he enters a trance, and Wizard finally snaps and just kills the high priest. We all freak out in character, and he says,
"He was taking too long. He's more useful to us for his XP anyway. We know where he keeps his key."
So he's obviously metagaming, as his character had no rational reason to do this. When we point this out to him out of character, he just says,
"I don't give an F. He was annoying me."
But now we have bigger problems, as the high priest obviously has guards that attack us. Wizard tries to reassure us that we have the upper hand, because they are all level 1. We were level 3 and massively outnumbered. The guards beat us and arrest us. As we are getting arrested, Wizard accuses us of bad strategy and resource management, and goes over all the ways we could have hypothetically won. We are a bit irritated, as he is clearly using his character to vent his frustration at us for something that was 100% his fault. But that's not all. In prison, Cleric attempted to reason with the guards, appealing to their shared faith and apologizing for Wizard's actions, hypothesizing that Wizard may have been temporarily possessed by Shadowfell entities, and therefore cannot be legally responsible for what happened. To our benefit, the guards bought it, and our party would be granted an audience with the Marquis of the city for a fair accounting of what happened. This would also be a perfect opportunity for us to explain to the authorities our solution to the Shadowfell threat, and maybe work together. Once we get to the Marquis's keep, Wizard then says,
"I only counted 5 guards and 1 pampered noble. A rookie mistake."
We beg him to not do what he is thinking about, but he decides to cast Lightning Bolt on the Marquis and demands that the other spellcasters start firing spells on the other guards, believing that we can win as we are restrained. The Marquis is killed, and the idiot Wizard asks,
"How much XP does that get us? Are we able to level up yet?"
as hordes of guards pour in and attack us. The Dungeon Master is merciful enough to let us wiggle our way out of our chains, and we end up escaping, with the exception of Wizard and Cleric, who didn't even try to escape. After his character died, he started cursing and yelling at us, asking why we fled. We told them that it was an unwinnable situation, and that he brought this on himself. Now, we will have to sneak back into the late High Priestess' keep to steal this key. I remember that I told Wizard that he made this whole thing way harder than it needed to be, but we were up for the challenge and asked him to roll a new character. Wizard just got angrier and again started, quote-unquote, pointing out all the ways we could have won, which we couldn't, and that we were too pussy to actually fight. He then goes on a rant about how
D&D is not about sneaking around or role-playing for hours on end. It's about the effing combat.
He was now clearly pissed off IRL. He eventually ended up calling Cleric, who is again his friend's girlfriend,
a dumb bitch,
after she told him to stop yelling. Warlock then got angrier than he ever was, and told him in no uncertain terms that he was to get out of his house immediately. Wizard then told us the next day over text that he wasn't coming back because we were rude and apparently don't know how to play quote-unquote real D&D. So yeah, honestly, in my opinion, good riddance. What an a-hole. I have never seen my friend get that angry, but I get it. TLDR, an old-school combat-only D&D player with murder-hobo tendencies gets butthurt when he dies and decides to be nasty to the party before ditching the game. Not that we want him playing with us anyway. I can understand that Wizard was a player that preferred combat to roleplay, but to go all murder hobo on important NPCs that were there to help the story going just because he wanted more combat wasn't fair to the other players or the dungeon master. And to say that a tabletop RPG like D&D is just for combat is just dumb. I mean, it's right there in the name of tabletop role-playing games. Then to get all pissed off and call Warlock's girlfriend a bitch was a really smart move. It's good that it sounds like they don't have to deal with this player anymore. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.